This is an area where we look at the standard example of a project presentation. This is a pretty acceptable way to present projects. We're going to just talk about what this way is before we actually get into the presentation of the project. The intent of this example is to provide words which convey your message. It forces the audience to focus on what's being displayed and not on you. The value of this approach is your message is there for the audience to read. It allows you as the presenter to read and to see where you're on track and to make sure that the key points are presented. It forces the audience to read what is displayed and not on you. This is very helpful if you're a little bit nervous when it comes to making presentations. You do not have to actually know your presentation very well. You just have to have the appropriate words on the screen that are displayed. The downfall of this approach is you cannot modify or change your presentation based on your perception of what the audience needs are. Your audience may be too busy or preoccupied of reading what's on the screen to pay any attention to whatever it is that you have to say. And often it conveys a message, right or wrong, that you may lack a little bit of confidence in whatever subject that you're trying to present. This is screen number one. Basically, all this screen does is give you, the audience, the name of your particular project. Usually has a date on it, tells who submitted it. It's basically the introduction of what your project is. This is screen number two. And screen number two usually is sort of like an agenda. It tells you all the items that you're going to present to your audience in the order that you're going to present it. In this case, we have the introduction, project scope, schedule, milestones, all the important things that you, as the presenter, are going to convey messages to your audience about those things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some time to read what's on there, and then we'll continue on. Okay, continuing on. So now we're going to get into a little bit more detail of each one of those topics that we had on the previous screen. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be some time to read it. I'm not going to say much about this because the whole intent is for you to read it. So I'm going to say very little about this. And if I was the actual presenting this to you, I'd say very little about this, other than the fact that basically Environmental Canada mandated project. Now, read. So we continue on with project scope, and again, I'm just going to let you read what's there. Very little talking from me as the presenter. Again, continuing on to the next slide. Project, what is out of scope? So we say what we are going to do, what we're not going to do. We're not going to make a plan or recommendation for the old building. We're not going to complete the functional operations as part of this project. We're not going to do maintenance. So you can read what's on there. Give you a moment to do that. Now we're going to look at the schedule. Now there's a trick that you can use here when you want your audience to read something, is what you want to do is you want to be able to read it yourself once and then read it yourself again, and then add a couple of seconds on before you continue on. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to read it once, and then read it again, add a couple seconds on, and then we'll go to the next slide. On to the next slide. Now this is a little bit more difficult as a milestone one, but it's very important. Now what you might want to do on each one of these, if you're the presenter, just say the value of the milestone, what the intent of the milestone is, and then let the audience read it. again twice. And we're going to do that now. Next item we're going to go on to is procurement. Again, based on that second slide we had, basically our agenda, we're going to talk about procurement and what we're going to procure. Again, very simple, some things on here. It tells you about what we're going to procure here, and you can give a little words around that if you like, or you can just let them read it. And then next we're going to go communications, and communication is always a very important part of the project, and you might want to mention that, and here's how you're going to do it, the 4 bullet points of how you're going to do it. I want to just bring to your attention the common mistake that a lot of presenters make is when they do a presentation like this and they have the words on that, they actually just read the words. And they actually say, like, all internal communications will run through the program unless otherwise they. Now, that's just not acceptable to do that. Either let the audience read the words or turn around and actually just have some different things on there. But don't read what's there. It's not a lesson in reading. The audience can read themselves. So, moving on. This is the work breakdown structure. And again, WBS, I recommend that what you do is you actually build that out and actually say it's a work breakdown structure. Again, some key points to what the work breakdown structure is, some key dates on there. You can read it, give you a few more seconds to read that. Now, don't be afraid if we're actually doing a presentation like this. If you go too fast, somebody will tell you to go back to the previous slide because they hadn't finished reading it. And then this is a budget. Now this is a very cluttered screen, and it always will be a very cluttered screen for a budget when you present it, and the traditional standard way to do that. Again, give a little extra time for people to read this. So if you read it twice and it takes 10 seconds, instead of adding 2 seconds, maybe add another 10 seconds on that. People really need to understand this, and there's a lot of words on this particular screen. So we're going to give you another 10 seconds or so to read this particular screen about the budget. And then next thing we're going to talk about quality management. Again, the same thing, it's a bullet point, allow the audience to read it. So now we move on to the next item, which is risk management. And I, as a presenter, would say a little bit about all projects have risk. And then here's a list of the risks we've identified as part of this project. I will give you a moment or two to actually read the risk as listed. Moving on to the next slide. Stakeholders, again, stakeholders are a very key ingredient to the success of a project. Here's our identified as stakeholders and their actual titles. Now that we've finished and we've presented all the items that were on the agenda that we have, now what we want to do is we want to summarize our project. And basically, the project manager will probably just read these 3 key points. Project will be completed and operational by November the 8th. 3 pieces of equipment and 16 staff were relocated. The cost to do this is to be $249,000. And basically allow them 3 seconds to do that, and then move on where you actually take questions. And the audience can ask questions of you. Now, the key to questions is to make sure that they are relevant questions, and if there's too much detail, point them to the project management plan. Now that's basically the end of your presentation, and that's a very standard way that presentations are presented and conveyed, that the message is conveyed to audiences. So what I want to do now is just sort of wrap up this whole idea of a standard example of a project presentation. Again, it's basically you convey your message through words and not through your presentation skills. The thing about words that are displayed on screens is that you're always going to get caught with an example like this. In our schedule, we had the project close be November the 3rd, 2016. At the very end of it, we said that the project would be operational by November the 8th. Now, somebody's going to catch you on that particular thing. The problem with having words and screens is that they're there. And once it's there, you cannot change it. And basically, you're kind of caught. And some people will focus more on the errors that you make in your presentation by using words or spelling or having incorrect dates and that sort of stuff than on what you're trying to present. So often it is very difficult to do that. So make sure when you go through your presentation that everything aligns and that there are no spelling errors or no errors like the one here, for example. Again, the whole value of this is that it focuses the audience to read on the screen. It gives all the information so you don't miss any key points. This is a standard way, and many project managers do this.